Hi, and welcome to our third episode of Ask Ira Live. I'm Emma Kate Austin here with Ira Winderman. So excited to talk about all your questions, everything going on. Before we get into the holiday weekend, let's talk some Miami Heat basketball. And in the spirit of holiday giving, should the Heat consider re-gifting some of their players?
Yeah, I figured we'd get a little bit of a head start this week because we know what people are thinking come Monday. Yeah, I don't think so. And I think the Heat, some people might feel right now, Emma Kate, that the Heat got some ugly sweaters. So people are looking at what can they re-gift, what can they do, and what makes this significant at this time of year is this. December 15th is the first day you were eligible to trade players you signed in the offseason as free agents. So when you look at this graphic here, James Johnson, Dion Waiters, Kelly Olynyk all signed free agent deals in early July. Just recently, December 15th was the first time the Heat even were allowed to trade them. Josh Richardson, he signed an extension this summer. By rule, he can't be signed until after the Heat is done playing their last game, regular season or the playoffs. And Udonis Haslem, because he's a veteran on a one-year deal, he must approve a trade. They're not trading the captain. He's on the cover of their season media guide. I don't think they want to do a new photo shoot. But what it does is it puts basically everyone on the roster is in play right now. So really for the first time in late December is when you can assess your roster and you can say to yourself, okay, what packages, what salaries work together? And that, of course, leads to the question of, do you want to do something now? Do you know who your team is, or is it a little bit early before even midseason to make that kind of decision?
Yep, and the Heat are right now 16-15 before Friday night's game tonight against Dallas. They're one game above 500. So have they fallen short of expectations this season?
You know, but that's the whole thing. What are the expectations for this team? Is it we talked about the 30-11 finish at the end of last season? Is it the 41-41 final record so you could say, okay, this is a 500 team? Or is it the matter of you've had inconsistent players? We saw some of the names on the board there. James Johnson, viewed as inconsistent. Dion Waiters, throughout his career. Cleveland, Oklahoma City, viewed as inconsistent. Is this who they are? And it's really fascinating. As we tape this right now, getting ready for the back-to-back set against Dallas and against New Orleans. The Heat this season have never been more than 3 games under 500, never more than 1 game over 500. I mean, sort of mediocrity is their name right now. So where's it going? Do you say to yourself, well, they still could take off. Let's give it some time. Or, hey, we know who these guys are. It's been a year and a half. I think they pull back a little because you sense if the team gets healthy, which it is not right now, that they could still go on a run. So I think they wait for the health. But I think after a while, maybe you say to yourself, are these players just not healthy players? Are they injury prone? Do we have to move on then?
Mm-hmm. And one of the players you had on your list, Kelly Olynyk, is trade eligible. In the game against Boston,
yes,
he scored 32 points, a career high against his former team. He was showing that aggression that his teammates and coaches have been wanting to see. Is that Kelly Olynyk one we'll see any more this season? Is that something he can bring? Probably not on a nightly basis, scoring 32 points, but are we going to see him again?
As soon as that game was over, I'm in the locker room, TD Garden in Boston, and his teammates were saying, yes, shoot the ball. He is too selfless. He is looking for everyone else. He stays at the high post on the elbow there, and he's looking to make the backdoor pass to feed his other teammates. They did not pay this guy $50 million over 4 years to sort of be subordinate to the other players. They wanted him to step forward. But here's the issue here. He did this in the absence of Hassan Whiteside and the absence of James Johnson. Are the minutes there? And they still have Bam Adebayo to get the minutes for. This team is going to have to decide one fundamental thing relatively soon. Can they play him alongside Hassan Whiteside? Can they play him alongside Bam Adebayo as they're starting him right now? Can they play him with James Johnson and another big? Because there is no way when you're paying Hassan Whiteside $98 million over 4 years and Kelly Olynyk $50 million over 4 years, you can play either or. When you're limiting those guys to 24 minutes, only half a game, you're not getting the best of either. So can the Heat in today's small ball NBA play big? That's what we have to wait and see. Eric Spoelstra has been a little reluctant now, but you know what? If Kelly Olynyk does what he did in Boston and can be that versatile, you give up a little on the defensive end. They went zone defense in that game in Boston just to hide him a little. So hide Kelly on one end, take advantage on the other.
Mm-hmm. So there's Olynyk, and then you have Waiters and Johnson. So have any of those players specifically underperformed for their contracts?
Well, again, it's the inconsistency. So I always wonder throughout their career, who are they in the first place? James Johnson, now he's injured, has the ankle bursitis. He started to come on a little bit. He's the team leader. He was voted a tri-captain. He has not been as good as he was at the end of last season. His three-point shooting has not been as good. He's had the aggression, but he just hasn't fit in as well. Again, the roster is mostly together, but there is Bam Adebayo. There is Kelly Olynyk. There's enough of a different mix that I think he's the guy who has to step forward a little more. His versatility. Look, people were comparing him last year to LeBron James. That's not fair. But to say he's the Heat's versatile type player like LeBron, that's what he needs to be. When he gets back, that's when I want to see a 1 to 2 week sample of what is he. And then mid-season, mid-January, about 3 weeks before the February 8th trading deadline, you can say to yourself, does this mix work? When your catalyst is not playing well, you really can't expect the entire mix to be playing well as well.
Mm-hmm. And Ira, you know the Heat probably better than just about anyone, and you've watched Pat Riley's decisions for 2 decades now. So what do you think he's going to do in terms of a trade deadline, and when might he do it?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Pat Riley falls in love with his players. Pat Riley convinces himself, these are my guys. He says it, I will go to war with them. He wants to make this work because so many people in the offseason said, wow, $200 million combined for Dion Waiters and James Johnson and Kelly Olynyk and the extension for Josh Richardson. He wants to justify those moves. He wants to say, I stood by my men. But here's my issue with all of that. This is a league about individual stars, and we've seen it in recent games. The end of the Atlanta game, they needed a go-to player. They had Dion Waiters, Josh Richardson, no one really to take over. The Boston game, when the Celtics came back, they had Kyrie Irving. They had their guy. He got a bad shot from Dion Waiters, got a shot from Josh Richardson that almost hit the side of the backboard. They need that closer. If Pat Riley says to himself, I'm going to develop my closer from within, I don't know who it's going to be. That's fine. If not, there's a reason he went after Gordon Hayward. There's a reason he went after Kevin Durant. He knows he needs that whale kind of player. So I think he's going to reach a point. Pat Riley does not play for 8th place and 1 round and done in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. So enough of my questions. Let's take some of yours. First question, we had a couple of these, same topic. So Ira, this team is lacking a true go-to player or closer. Like you just said. The Paul George experiment in OKC clearly hasn't panned out the way everyone thought it would. Do you see an opportunity for Pat Riley to get his whale this trade deadline?
Well, the Paul George situation is fascinating in Oklahoma City because, they got him from Indiana and everyone said, oh, they won the trade. They said Sabonis there. They wound up sending Victor Oladipo, but they got the better end of that deal. Then they brought in Carmelo Anthony. Oh, they have a big 3. They're going to challenge the Warriors. They're going to challenge the Rockets. And instead, they're a sub-500 team, still trying to find an identity. I think it is very, very difficult right now for Russell Westbrook to play in a big 3 type setup when he was alone for 1 season without Kevin Durant. So I do wonder if there's a point when Oklahoma City says, you know what, Paul George is a free agent after this season. We have to at least get something for our investment after giving up Sabonis and Oladipo. So I think that's the way they might lean. I don't think the Heat necessarily have what they want. What do you want for him? You want young prospects. The Heat are sort of limited there. You want draft choices. 2 of the Heat's next 4 first-round picks go to the Suns for the Goran Dragic deal. You're limited there also. But here's the one I came up with. Because you know what? If we're going to do a TV show once a week, we're going to think big. As big as that graphic behind me. What if Oklahoma City says, well, we know we're going to lose Paul George, but we're stuck with next year's $38 million for Carmelo Anthony. We've seen Melo play this year. It's not a pretty sight. What if they say, if you take our Paul George, you have to take our Carmelo also? And the Heat goes all in. All of a sudden, you can put in Hassan Whiteside, Justice Winslow, James Johnson, Tyler Johnson. You can say, hey, for your headache of taking this player off your hands, we can give you all this. That might be something where Oklahoma City says, you know what? That's what we need around Russell Westbrook. Complementary players. Players like a Justice Winslow who was brought in here to complement Dwayne Wade, to complement Chris Bosh. I could see Pat Riley going all in. And people might say, Melo at this point? Well, you know what? If it gets Paul George, even if it's a risk on an expiring contract, that is totally a Pat Riley-like move. A lot of teams in the NBA would say, we're not renting Paul George and making a big payment. Pat Riley would look at it as, we're renting Paul George and we're keeping Paul George. I would definitely keep an eye on Oklahoma City.
All right. But again, do we want that headache of Carmelo Anthony? We'll see.
Yeah, Pat Riley thinks big. He used to be someone. So many reclamation projects under Pat Riley. So many guys came in here as they were a headache. Tim Hardaway, Anthony Mason, they wound up being contributors. I think Pat Riley feels in the Pat Riley school of wayward players, he could turn around anyone.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him for sure. Douglas asks, James Johnson hasn't had that big of an impact as we all would have hoped. I believe Justice Winslow coming back, that Winslow will be able to do some of those things.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, and this has been the problem for the Heat this season. They are such similar players with Justice Winslow and James Johnson, as you mentioned, that they both do the same thing. They're facilitators, they're rebounders, they're playmakers, but are they scorers? And this has been the problem with the Heat in the forward rotation this year. They've had two players who mostly haven't been scorers when they played Justice Winslow alongside Josh Richardson. Well, Josh Richardson had a great December. I mean, he's almost doubled some of his numbers from November. So he's come on. The thing is, what about Justice Winslow? Will he emerge as a player you feel comfortable enough as a starter? Or will he be the kind of player you say to yourself, you know what? He's going to be a nice sixth man. He's going to be a contributor. And again, this goes back to what we spoke about last week. Should the expectations on Justice Winslow be a former lottery and first-round pick, or should the expectations of Justice Winslow be, hey, he's been here 3 years, we know what he is and who he is, and we just go there with him? So I think with Justice Winslow, so much of it from fans, from media, and from the coaching staff has to be, forget where he was drafted. Is he a rotation player? Is he good enough to help you win a conference title, help you win a championship? If your answers are yes in any role, he's good enough. If your answers are no, then even after 3 years, you might have to say to yourself, no rookie extension, maybe we move on.
Mm-hmm. And now James Johnson is sidelined with an ankle injury. So could this be a time for the Heat to kind of take stock and reevaluate what they are without him?
Well, I think that's what Eric Spoelstra is doing right now. I mean, everyone is going, my Lord, look at the players who are out. No Whiteside, no Dragic, no Winslow, no James Johnson. And Eric Spoelstra just turned it around, and he said to himself this, well, now I can see what Jordan Mickey can do and Bam Adebayo can do. And I got to tell you, there is nothing wrong in the short term with experimenting on other players. But every day I look at the Eastern Conference standings, and even when the Heat win, I still see them in 9th place or still struggling for that last playoff spot. At some point, Eric Spoelstra is going to have to say the experimentation is nice, whether we just mentioned with a Winslow, whether with a Bam Adebayo, whether with a Jordan Mickey. I need to know who my guys are, who I'm going to ride with. That's what this whole first half of the season is about. Getting to rotations, finding the right players, seeing what works and what doesn't work, and then you move forward from there. So this is not a terrible time for the Heat. If you can stay afloat and find out about your players, at least you're getting some gain out of that. I believe second half of the season, just like second half of last year, when they went 30-11, that's when you have to say the learning is over. The patience is over. Now it's go time. I think go time starts about mid-January.
Mm-hmm. All right, and Andy in Coral Gables says, if AJ Hammons isn't called up now, why is he on the team?
This is cold, but I don't believe that they get this show yet in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where the Heat's developmental league team is, so I'll be open among my close personal friends here. AJ Hammons was never brought in as a player. I mean, yes, the former Purdue big man is an outside shooter, he gives you height. He was brought in for the Heat to get rid of Josh McRoberts' salary. In order for the Heat to do their offseason signings and also bring in Wayne Ellington and his $6 million contract back, they had to lose salary cap space for this season. The deal with the Devil was this: get rid of Josh McRoberts' big one-year contract and take on 2 years of AJ Hammons. So they've done that. AJ Hammons is, this sounds cold in my business, human salary cap ballast. He is in $1 million contract that if they want to make a trade and they work out the cap math and they're $1 million short, they throw him in there. I think he remains on this roster until February 8th, the trading deadline. I don't think he ever plays a game this season for the Miami Heat, or maybe never. He's just a guy who is a contract right now, but they're going to reach a point with these two-way contracts. Derek Walton Jr., Matt Williams Jr. can only be in the NBA for 45 days. I believe they convert one of them to a full-time spot. They take AJ Hammons' spot. So more of a name than a threat. Like we spoke about, so many big men. Hassan Whiteside, Bam Adebayo, Kelly Olynyk, Udonis Haslem doesn't even play. So I think those are the priorities. So right now, he's biding his time in snowy Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I don't believe we will be going live from there this season, so I think we're safe.
Yeah, I'm fine if we stay
Yeah,
here.
it's like, I don't think we need to bundle up for that one.
No, we're good in sunny South Florida. So keep submitting those questions. You can do it on Twitter with hashtag AskIraLive or on YouTube or on our website, and we will answer some more towards the end of the show. But let's take a look back now, and Ira, tell us about your all-time top 10 shooting guards.
Well, as you know, every week we look back 3 decades of Heat. Yes, I've been here for all of them, but folks, I started when I was 12, so I'm not that old. So we can look back on our 30 years, 3 decades of the Heat. This year we're going to look at shooting guards and the guys who made a difference either in a moment, in a season, or in a career. So I'm starting my list, top 10. We'll go backwards just to keep it exciting. With our last 3 on the list, Rex Chapman. Okay, he did not have a Heat quote-unquote career, but he had a moment. There was a moment in 1996 when the Heat wound up having to trade most of their roster. And because they traded most of their roster, they had the minimum 8 players available to play Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and the Chicago Bulls. A Bulls team that would win more than 70 games. They had no chance at all. And then Rex the Wonder Dog, they used to call him in Kentucky, steps up. 39 points, 9 of 10 on three-pointers. It might have been, if not the greatest Heat game ever individually, the most unexpected game. And the Bulls look back on that season. They see some of the losses they had. But to lose that night to Rex Chapman, this is a guy who made a career, who made a season in a game. I think it was one of the greatest performances in Heat history. I have him as number 10. Number 9, Eddie House, three-point shooter, came out of Arizona State, hit the big shots. Number 8, John Sunvolt, an original member of the Heat. He went to the three-point shootout as one of the original players when they started that three-point contest. Just a guy who, if you didn't have that excitement of three-pointers in the Heat's first season, you might have just looked and said, oh my God, they're 15 and 67. So at least he kept it real on the court with his three-pointers.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Eddie House, and he was here before three-point shooting became the ultimate weapon in the NBA.
Right.
And he was a fan favorite, but also a favorite of Pat Riley's daughter.
Yeah,
right?
it's an interesting story. Elizabeth Marie, Pat Riley's daughter, loved Eddie House. You could see he had the headband, he had this ebullient personality, he shot threes when the team wasn't scoring anyway, and she came up with the phrase and told her dad that he needed to free Eddie House. Well, all of a sudden, in American Airlines Arena, people started showing up with free Eddie House t-shirts. Well, the one thing you know about Pat Riley, he can be very single-minded. He knows what he wants to do. But when your daughter tells you what you want to do, Eddie House just became an ultimate fan favorite because of it. And to this day, if you mention Eddie House to Pat Riley, he'll go, oh yeah, free Eddie House. I ran into him the other day when the Heat played in Phoenix. He still has the passion for the game, still as wide-eyed as ever, and still has a special place in the heart of Pat Riley's daughter.
That's awesome.
So,
you gotta love players like that.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable list. We'll continue on. Brian Shaw, I have as number 7. He was known for his three-pointers. He's an interesting story we'll get to in a moment. He's the guy who played alongside Steve Smith. And this was sort of the start of positionless basketball. A guy who was he a shooting guard? Was he a point guard? So many people look at my lists and they say, wait, Ira, you have him in the wrong position. Even before Eric Spoelstra got here, we had a bunch of guys who played multiple positions. I have Vashawn Leonard on my list. Dr. Jack Ramsey used to call the Heat games. And whenever Leonard would make a three-pointer, it was always Leonard like that, and he'd bellow it out, and he made the big shots. And Kevin Edwards, the Heat's first ever shooting guard. Again, that first team was not very good. But you know what? The community bonded to them. You see this in all sports. When you get your expansion team, you're just so glad to have someone. Kevin Edwards, first shooting guard. To me, that first team, 1988-89, will always hold a special place because of that.
Mm-hmm. And Brian Shaw, you mentioned, he not only made this list, but also set a very impressive three-point single-game record while dating Madonna.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a list we'll do later in the year in the show about famous Heat celebrities. Brian Shaw was dating Madonna during one season. She seemed to be a big Heat fan. She would come to Rosie O'Donnell to all the games. And in the middle of their romance, dalliance, whatever you want to call it, Brian Shaw steps up against Milwaukee and hits 10 three-point shots. That still to this day ties the Heat record for most three-pointers in a game, tied with Mario Chalmers. So whether it was the Madonna effect or not, Brian Shaw will always have a place in Heat lore. He's now an assistant coach for the LA Lakers. We'll see him in the building a little later in the season. So Madonna, three-pointers, Brian Shaw had it all.
Yeah, it was a good year for him.
And then we'll round out our list here, and here's another name. We mentioned Rex Chapman for a moment. Well, Emma Kate, everyone knows Ray Allen at the moment. Well, later in the season, with the show, we're going to talk about all-time greatest Heat moments. You can sort of go ahead on that one with Ray with the shot, Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals. It was over. They were lining the court with those yellow ropes. Ray Allen told the ushers, get those, can't use the word right here on Family Fare, ropes out of the way. He hits the three. Overtime, he wins Game 6 against the Spurs, win Game 7 against the Spurs. So just for that moment, and 2 pretty good years off the bench, I have him on the list, Dan Marley, Thunder Dan, and what he did for the Heat teams in those great rivalry games against the Knicks. And you know what? Here's a guy who gets shortchanged. Because on any other team, for what he did to keep the Heat afloat during the lean years, the fact that he's a local from Pompano Beach, went to Ely High School, lives now out in Weston, Eddie Jones, he could arguably be a lot of teams' best ever shooting guard. But for the Heat, there's one guy. There's that one guy. I mean, again, I could do these lists and I can get, let's go for the drama now and tune in next week. But what Dwayne Wade did for this franchise. And the fact is, from the moment they drafted him, get those Cleveland colors off of him, please. From the moment that the Heat drafted him, he just changed the franchise. You can talk about Shaquille O'Neal arriving in the big semi-tractor trailer and what he did, and we could talk about the big three. But think about this. None of the Heat's 3 championships or NBA Finals appearances would have happened without Dwayne Wade because of the way he wound up here. The fact that LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Chris Bosh and, yes, Darko Milicic went ahead of him in that NBA lottery. I mean, think how history would be so different if Dwayne went earlier and we're talking now about Darko Milicic on the Heat's all-time greatest list. And I don't think he would have made any of the 5 we did. What Dwayne Wade did is he is the embodiment of the franchise. And I know this. Michael Jordan, United Center, has his own statue. I have no question that not only will Dwayne Wade's number 3 eventually go to the rafters, but he's the guy who should have the statue out front at 601 Biscayne Boulevard, because really everything that has happened for the Heat since he was drafted has been because of him. And even these last few summers, the heartache of 2016 when he left as a free agent, he was the Heat story. This offseason when he was a free agent again and chose to play with LeBron in Cleveland, he was a Heat story. And when he comes back here to American Airlines Arena again this season, he'll be a Heat story. He is not only the greatest player in Miami Heat franchise history, but I think you can look at it and say he might be the greatest athletic icon, with all apologies to Dan Marino, considering his longevity, and unlike Dan, not a knock, and because of Dwayne's championship success. So this list was so easy. I started with number 1, and I had to work backwards. And again, I had him on my list last week as a point guard. His versatility, you can make an argument even the time he played at small forward, he meant that much to this franchise.
Absolutely. And it's always fun to look back, but now we are going to take a moment to look ahead. And so the Heat have a pretty good stretch of games coming up, a lot of them here in the state of Florida.
Finally.
So what is interesting to you on this upcoming schedule?
Well, I look at it right now. The Heat's in the midst of a run where they have a 4-game homestand, 1 game in Orlando, and a 3-game homestand. So 7 of 8 finally back home. The Heat are coming off a stretch where they played 17 of 23 on the road. It's like a week on the road, a game at home, a week on the road. It was unfathomable. Yeah. The only road game is in Orlando. That's a week from this Saturday. So you're looking at that game again against the Magic. The Heat do not have to leave the state of Florida till January 8th. And to all the airline people, I say, see you then, I'm driving. Here's the problem, Emma Kate. The Heat play Orlando 4 times every season. They're in the Southeast Division. You play your teams, 2 games home, 2 on the road. They went 1-3 against the Magic last season. If you're asking me for one singular reason why the Heat lost the playoff tiebreaker at 41-41 with the Chicago Bulls, it's because they went 1-3 against the Magic. They are 0-1 against the Magic right now this season. They play them at home on a Wednesday in Orlando, unfortunately the same day as the Orange Bowl, on December 30th. They have to make a stand against this team. In order for where the Heat are right now, this is when you make hay. For the good news for the Heat, they're done with their 3-game season series with Boston. They won 2. They're done with their 2-game season series against Golden State. Didn't win. They're done with their 2-game season series against San Antonio. Didn't win. That doesn't matter. Win the games you're supposed to. I'll tell you right now, if the Heat go 1-3 against Orlando this season, no matter what else happens, I don't think they'll be good enough for the playoffs. They have to win that season series. And when you're down 0-1 after starting the opener, these next 2 games, to me, will be a real litmus test of where this team stands in their division, in their conference, and in the playoff race.
Absolutely. Let's hope things go well for them over this home
Stinking
stretch.
Magic ruined it last year.
Oh, man. All right, so let's take a few more questions from viewers, things that you guys want to know. One of them, we have, will Hassan Whiteside ever be healthy?
I have gotten that question in so many forms, and in my Ask Ira mailbag, in my Twitter. I understand the frustration. This was an injury where Hassan Whiteside was supposed to be evaluated in 1 to 2 weeks. Bone bruise, left knee. Same one he had early in the year. He missed 5 games. All of a sudden, we're a month in. We're 4 weeks in. This goes back to the question we raised last week. Injury versus pain. The thought is in sports, if you're in pain, if you're hurt, you play. If you're injured, you don't. The one thing we can't do, I can't do as a journalist, I don't think anyone, even a doctor can, is feel someone else's pain, is know the degree of discomfort they're in. But I think Hassan Whiteside has got to get to the point, he told us originally, I'm going to wait till I'm 100%. That was fine for a week. That was fine for 2 weeks. I think at some point you drag yourself out there and you show your teammates, I hope you can push through injury for me in a big game when we need it, because I'm going to push through injury for you. I think that's where the Heat are. I think there's a certain level of frustration that it's taken this long. But like Erik Spoelstra said, I'm not going to look at who's not here. I'm going to look at who's here. Now, will that impact things at the trade deadline and the Heat's view of him? I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate injury. I've never had a bone bruise on a knee. I've never played NBA basketball. But I certainly can appreciate the fans' frustration. They want to see him. He is one of this team's best players. You don't win in the NBA without your best players.
Exactly. And it's hard for them right now to have, we've got a lot of guys out injured.
Yeah,
so hopefully
too many injuries.
That'll get a little bit better soon. So how does the Heat beat Boston but lose to NBA worst Atlanta?
Yeah, this, again, we spoke at the top about the inconsistency and the reason never more than 3 under 500, never more than 1 over 500. It's an inconsistent team with inconsistent playing in an inconsistent style. The turnover problems they've had this year. Just when you think they have it turned out right, they throw in one of these clunkers. They go to New York and get blown out by the Knicks. They play the Pacers at home and lose by 25. They go to Atlanta, the NBA's worst team. Yes, they're shorthanded, and the Hawks are really pretty much in control except for one stretch late. That's what this team has to do. This team has to get back to that 30-11 finish the last season where they had that confidence. You can see it right now. And again, like I've said in almost every point here we've spoken about, who's your closer? Who's the one guy when you sit at American Airlines Arena or watch the game on Fox Sports Sun and you say, as long as he has the ball in his hands, I think we're okay? I don't think the Heat has that player. I think 25 other NBA teams say, okay, it's Porzingis, it's Kyrie Irving. Even Atlanta, it's Dennis Schroeder. They know who their guy is. The Heat have to find their guy. Some people thought it's Whiteside. Hard to do with a big man, especially when he's not there. Some people thought it's Goran Dragic. I think he's still exhausted from Eurobasket and playing an incredibly competitive month of September. Dion Waiters thought it was Dion Waiters because he's Dion Waiters. That's what the Heat has to find. There has to be that one guy at the end of games, and that's why we mentioned James Johnson. He did it last year against Detroit, got to the rim, Hassan Tippin, win. He did it against the Wizards, got to the rim and scored. They won in Washington. They have to find that one guy. When they find their consistent player, that's when the team's inconsistency will stop.
All right, so John wants to know, when we went on the run last year, Justice Winslow was out, and Rodney McGruder, Willie Reed, and Luke Babbitt were better role players than some with this current group. And that's a legitimate question. Here's the thing about the NBA. It's not always about having the best players. It's about having the best fit. And I think that's what the Heat are going through right now. Again, Bam Adebayo is new. Kelly Olynyk is new. When you look at it with this mix, Justice Winslow is new because he missed the second half of last season. So I think Erik Spoelstra is trying to find the chemistry. Right now he's playing a 9-man rotation. Wayne Ellington is really fit in, so he's had to extend it a little bit more. I think there's going to have to be a point where Erik Spoelstra says, I'm going to trust these 8 or even these 7, and these are my guys. You can't play everyone and win. So just like last year, he said, you know what? Token minutes at the start for Luke Babbitt. Going to play some Rodney McGruder. Willie Reed token minutes so Hassan Whiteside can play big minutes. I think he's going to have to find that also right now. I think they could have just as good a fit. They just haven't found him yet. And I think there's some of the newness that's hurt him and held him back a little. Mike from Austin, Texas says, "Hi, Ira. Wayne Ellington is having an elite three-pointer kind of year so far. Hopefully that continues as the season progresses. Why not have him in more late in fourth quarter or close of games?"
Well, I mean, and that's the whole thing. Wayne Ellington, what he's done from the three this year, has everyone's respect offensively. But this is still, and Eric Spoelstra says it over and over, we are a defensive-oriented, defense-first team. Wayne Ellington is a lot of things. He's a doting father. He's a really nice guy. He shoots great three-pointers. As a defender, there's a reason that he's been a journeyman and been on so many teams through his career. And I think Eric Spoelstra, just like with James Jones, for people who remember him, always said, I need a guy who can do it on both ends. But you know what? I think Eric Spoelstra is coming around, and we've seen it more in recent games. We've seen Wayne Ellington a little bit more. I think you'll see more of him because this league is changing, and it's becoming an offensive-first league. And Eric Spoelstra might not want to acknowledge that, or maybe better word, accept that. But I think now you're going to start seeing that, hey, if you can score a three, it doesn't really matter how many twos the other teams are scoring on you.
Exactly. I think we have time for one more question. Okay. Juan from Denver asks, can someone tell Eric Spoelstra's real estate agent that Waiters' island was built on step-back twos? I understand he's struggling, but Dion Waiters has to take smarter shots.
Yeah, someone's got to convince that of Dion Waiters. Okay, let's go back to the Dion Waiters story. Earlier this week, he winds up in Atlanta. He doesn't feel too good because, and this was a first to me, I don't know if you saw the story I wrote, he ate too much spaghetti.
Yeah.
Okay, now, I've seen guys miss games for reasons. Thankfully, he didn't miss that one. So sometimes with Dion, it's the choices he makes. Those step-back jumpers are low percentage shots, but he feels so confident in them. When Dion Waiters is attacking, when Dion Waiters is drawing fouls, that's when he's a better player. Dion Waiters loves him some spaghetti, loves him some step-back jumpers. He has to be weaned off of both. Maybe go to the fettuccine, maybe go a little linguine, and maybe go more set jumpers and attack-style baskets. They're still trying to work and change Dion. His confidence, culinary and on the court, are in one direction. I think you can bring out the best of Dion. Might be a little less pasta, a little less step back, but I think he can be salvaged on both ends.
All right, yes. Maybe save the pasta for after the game so we don't get sick. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. It's always a blast to talk with you, Ira. And we hope you enjoy your holiday weekend and continue to submit those questions. We'll be back for more Ask Ira Live next week.
Well, we'll carbo load and get going. Thank you.
There we go.